Have you ever wondered what the last days of the American Civil War looked like? Picture a nation torn at the seams, its future hanging by a thread. These were the days that decided the fate of a country, the days that cemented the United States as we know it today. Understanding this chapter of history is akin to peeling back the layers of a complex narrative, each layer revealing a new facet of the story. Join us as we delve into the chronicles of the final days of the American Civil War. The year is 1865, and the Civil War has been raging for 4 long, bloody years. In the early days of that year, the war had reached a state of grim deadlock. The Confederacy, led by the indomitable Robert E. Lee, was desperately clinging to their fading hopes for independence, while the Union, under the command of Ulysses S. Grant, was tightening its grip. Major battles had been fought on various fronts, each shaping the course of the war. From the harrowing Battle of Gettysburg in Pennsylvania to the Siege of Vicksburg in Mississippi, the war had seen its share of bloodshed and heartbreak. The Confederates had won some, the Union others, but as we moved into the final year of conflict, the tide was turning. The Battle of Nashville, fought in December of 1864, was a significant turning point. The Union forces, led by Major General George H. Thomas, dealt a crushing blow to the Confederate Army of Tennessee. This victory significantly weakened the Confederate forces and paved the way for the Union's final push. Simultaneously, in the East, General William Tecumseh Sherman was conducting his infamous March to the Sea. This total war strategy saw the Union forces laying waste to the Southern infrastructure, crippling their economy and breaking their morale. By the time Sherman reached Savannah in late December, the Confederacy was teetering on the brink of collapse. These events led to a shift in momentum, with the Union forces gaining an upper hand. The Confederacy was stretched thin, their resources dwindling. The Union, on the other hand, was gathering steam, their resolve strengthened by recent victories. As the year 1865 dawned, it was clear that the end was in sight. The Confederacy, though still fighting with the courage and determination that had defined them throughout the war, was facing an uphill battle. The Union, with its superior resources and strategic victories, was closing in. The stage was set for a dramatic conclusion to this bloody chapter of American history. As spring approached, the Union forces were closing in on the Confederacy. The air was thick with tension, much like a suspenseful novel, but this was no work of fiction. This was the spring of 1865, a time of decisive battles that would shape the course of American history. Let's take a moment to venture back to this pivotal time. The Battle of Five Forks, often referred to as the Waterloo of the Confederacy, was a significant turning point. The Union Army, under the command of Major General Philip Sheridan, executed a swift and deadly maneuver against the Confederate forces. The Confederates, led by General George Pickett, were caught off guard while enjoying a fish fry of all things. The resulting Union victory effectively cut off the Confederates' last major supply line. Following the defeat at Five Forks, the Confederates were forced to abandon their stronghold at Petersburg. The fall of Petersburg, after a grueling 9-month siege, was a blow from which the Confederacy would never recover. It was like a punch to the gut, a punch that pushed them out of the ring and onto the ropes. And then there was the fall of Richmond, the Confederate capital. When Union forces marched into the city, it was a symbolic and strategic victory that signified the imminent end of the Confederacy. Imagine, if you will, the sight of Union soldiers raising their flag over the capital. It was like watching the sun rise after a long, dark night. But let's not get too carried away. Yes, the Union had significant victories, but the Confederacy wasn't about to go down without a fight. They were like a cornered dingo, desperate and dangerous. The Confederate forces were on the run, but the war was far from over. On April 9, 1865, General Robert E. Lee faced a difficult decision. The weight of the Confederacy rested heavily on his shoulders. Lee, a seasoned war veteran, had seen his fair share of battles, victories, and defeats, but nothing could have prepared him for the choice he was about to make. The Confederate army was severely depleted, with resources dwindling and morale at an all-time low. Lee had to make a choice between continuing a losing battle, causing further death and destruction, or surrendering to the Union forces, effectively ending the Civil War. It was a decision that would not only shape his legacy, but the future of the United States as we know it. Lee, recognizing the futility of further combat, decided to meet with Union General Ulysses S. Grant at a place called the Appomattox Courthouse. This wasn't a decision made lightly. It was a decision made with the understanding that the sacrifice of pride was necessary for the greater good. The surrender wasn't just about Lee or his army. It was a symbol, a turning point in a war that had torn the nation apart. This was the moment when the South acknowledged the North's victory, when the Confederacy's dream of an independent nation was shattered, and the Union's vision of a united America began to take shape. Lee's surrender was significant for another reason. It set a precedent for the peaceful surrender of arms in the face of defeat. There were no executions, no public trials, no punishment for the defeated. Instead, the soldiers were allowed to return home with their horses, a tacit acknowledgement of the immense toll the war had taken on both sides. This moment in history was a testament to Lee's character. Despite his personal beliefs and allegiances, he had the foresight to see that prolonging the war would only result in more pointless bloodshed. His decision to surrender, however painful it may have been, was ultimately an act of mercy, a gesture of humanity amidst the horrors of war. With Lee's surrender, the end of the Civil War was in sight. The surrender marked the beginning of a long and arduous journey towards healing and reconstruction, a journey that continues even today. The news of Lee's surrender spread quickly, but the nation was far from healed. In the immediate aftermath of the war, the landscape of the country was as scarred as the hearts of its people. Cities lay in ruins, fields were ravaged, and families torn apart. The wounds of war were deep, and the path to recovery was long and arduous. Just when the nation was breathing a sigh of relief, a tragic event struck. President Abraham Lincoln, the man who had steered the country through the storm of war, was assassinated. The shock of this event plunged the nation into further turmoil. This was a man who had not only led his country through its darkest hour, but had also signed the Emancipation Proclamation, freeing millions of enslaved people. His vision of a united nation where all men were free was left to his successors to fulfill. The task of rebuilding the nation fell to President Andrew Johnson, who had the unenviable task of navigating the turbulent waters of the Reconstruction era. This was a time of great change. Laws were passed, amendments were made to the Constitution, and efforts were made to integrate the former Confederate states back into the Union. The 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments were ratified, abolishing slavery, granting citizenship to all born or naturalized in the United States, and giving all men the right to vote regardless of race or previous condition of servitude. But the road to true equality was fraught with obstacles. The struggle for civil rights would continue for another century, and even today, the echoes of the Civil War can still be heard. The aftermath of the war was a time of great change and great challenge. It was a period of healing and rebuilding, of coming to terms with the past and looking to the future. The war was over, but its impact would be felt for generations. The last days of the American Civil War were a time of great change and uncertainty, a time when the chessboard of conflict saw its pieces scattered and the game irrevocably changed. We've journeyed together through the beginning of the end as tensions heightened and the stakes soared. We've traversed the blood-soaked fields of the final battles, where the air was thick with gunpowder and desperation, the ground trembling beneath the weight of a nation's fate. We've stood shoulder to shoulder with General Robert E. Lee as he made the heart-wrenching decision to surrender, a decision that echoed with the silent sighs of relief and the unspoken sorrows of defeat. His surrender, a sign of humility and acceptance, marked the beginning of the end of this tumultuous chapter. We've also walked through the wreckage and the aftermath, where the echoes of cannons were replaced by the hammering of reconstruction. The nation, once divided, began the arduous task of healing and rebuilding, stitching together the torn fabric of its identity. The Civil War, a cataclysmic event that shook the foundations of the United States, left an indelible mark on the country's psyche. Its echoes resonate even today, influencing our societal structure, our politics, our very understanding of freedom and equality. The end of the Civil War marked a new chapter in American history, one that continues to shape our nation today, a testament to the resilience and fortitude of the American spirit, forever etched in the annals of time.